So welcome to the first Beyond Zoom research seminar and webcast. We will investigate a little bit how especially adult education changed in the pandemic. How did different organizations started to adapt to the pandemic which we had, but also how are they coming back? So we're interested to understand the experiences, the passes they had. We would love to understand the tools they might have used. And we're also interested in a kind of, foresight for the future. So what are the lessons learned from that? And I'm really happy that we have Hayley Trowbridge with us. I hope I pronounced the name right, from People's Voice Media. She might say maybe a few words about People's Voice Media herself, but it's maybe noteworthy to underline that they are the ones who actually came up with the idea of Beyond Zoom in the first place. And also they are working a lot with adults, and specifically adults with special needs, vulnerable groups. And they are focused a lot on participation and empowerment. And so maybe this is also a really interesting aspect on to understand what happened to those things during the pandemic. How did it change? And how could potential maybe hybrid future ways to teach in this area could look like? So without further ado, Hayley, the floor is yours. We have online and offline audiences, so I will mute our microphone here so nobody will disturb you. And when you're done, we will have a round of question and answers. And yeah, I'm really happy that you join us for this new format. Let's see how that gonna work out.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining and for the project for inviting me to speak. I prepared a short presentation, about 15-20 minutes or so, that will talk to you about how we at People's Voice Media transitioned our community reporting training activities, which is basically storytelling training activities, from in-person environments to online environments, and then back again. Obviously push forward this kind of innovation in how we deliver our training by the pandemic that we're all in. So what I'll explore in this presentation is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with People's Voice Media and our work and community reporting, I'll give you an overview of those. And then the second part of the presentation will be exploring how we did that transition of digital storytelling training activities between online and offline environments, and now where we're at, where it's more blended style programs, and share with you some key learning from that, and then hopefully some questions and discussion afterwards. So if I start with who PVM is. So we're a UK-based charity, but we operate across the UK and Europe, and we've been around since 1995. Our main purpose in this world is to create a scenario and societies in which people's lived experience, and by that we mean their experience of the world from their perspective, is heard, valued, and has influence. So basically, we use storytelling as a tool for social change. And our educational programs in digital storytelling all have a social change remit. So what we do, we support people to improve their own world and the world around them by using their experiences to address social inequalities and to inform services, research and policy in a bid so that institutions, systems and society changes for the better. And some of those inequalities and injustices that exist in society are challenged. So our training is educational, but it also has a wider social permit kind of remit to it as well. So core to every part of our programs and our training that we deliver is that people's voices are heard, as Martin was saying, particularly voices who are often marginalised or excluded. So whether that be disabled people, whether it be people from Black or other racially minoritized communities, whether it is adults with learning disabilities or adults with low academic qualifications. We work with a range of groups. And what we want to do through our training is to challenge and rethink existing perceptions and behaviours and power structures, and to challenge those in a hope that the training brings about new ideas and new ways of working that puts people's experiences and their lives at the core. So in a nutshell, we're trying to change the world one story at a time. The core values that underpin our work are on the screen, and I wanted just to talk you through these momentarily so that you understand what's at the heart of our training programs. These are the values that underpin what we do. So collaboration and equity, these are the key ways that basically we work. It represents how we work with people. We want to create platforms in which voices are heard and there is equity in that. We operate with authenticity and integrity. This is how we hold ourselves to account. It helps us support us to reflect on our practice. So we know we can always improve. We know we're not flawless. So part of that is about having that integrity to reflect and be critical of our own actions. And that will come through as you see how we've developed our training programs. Also, possibly one of our hardest values is to be learning and evolving. It's about being open to change, allowing us to innovate and allowing us to adapt to new contexts. As you'll see in the work that we did transforming our training programs online, offline and back again and all of that, we had to really lean into this value and embrace change quite suddenly. And then finally, optimism and joy. We try to be positive in all environments and look for solutions, and hopefully the way in which we've adapted our training programs during and in this kind of COVID recovery era reflects that. So what do we do? So we do training, as I've said. This normally relates to community reporting or broader digital storytelling work, but also fields like co-production, advocacy and voice. And a part of our work that we do is in training the trainer as well. In addition to that, and connected into those training programs, is consultancy and research. So we support others to use digital storytelling within their services and policy development. And we use community reporting within formal research projects and learning and evaluation roles as well. And although they're three kind of slightly different areas of our work, they're all interconnected. And what connects them is community reporting. And this is our core digital storytelling method, which I'm going to explore a bit more during this webinar of how we've adapted it. So basically, community reporting is a peer-to-peer digital storytelling movement that we founded in the latter 2017 era. And what it is, it's a particular approach to helping people use things like smartphones, tablets, audio recorders, little stills cameras to gather their experiences of the world and share them with others. Now on this slide, there's an animation, but we can't play it right now, but hopefully we'll embed it into the webinar for those of you who watch the final edit. So Martin, I'll do you an intro line for that. So here's an animation that shows what community reporting is all about. And then you can edit it in. But for those of you on the webcast now, I can share a link with you afterwards. And also Martin's got the slides so you can have a look at it yourselves. Basically, what that animation shows is our community reporting cycle that's on this slide. So when we talk about community reporting, we're talking about this cycle of activities that is based on the CRN decision-making framework for complex environments. And the reason it's based upon that framework is because we believe that people's lives and society is quite complex and it's multifactorial what's happening in the world. And therefore, we don't want a simple approach to understanding that or to training people how to understand citizen experience of the world. We believe that complex is the right framing for it. So community reporting then has these three stages in a cycle. The first stage is gathering stories, or what might be referred to as probing. And this is where we train people to be community reporters so that they develop the skills to not only tell their own stories, but to gather the stories from their peers and their communities. And this involves storytelling techniques such as snapshot stories, dialogue interviewing, personal monologues, journey stories, and a range of techniques that we apply. But it also involves the technical skills, whether that's how to take a photograph, how to record good audio or video, how to use websites to share that with others. And a key part of that training is also responsible practice. By responsible practice, what we mean is the ethics and the values that underpin the storytelling, and a sort of editorial best practice guidelines is produced in each of our trainings. So after that training, there is also curation, or what we refer to also as sense making. And this is where we work with groups of people to train them how to analyze stories, identify the learning in them, and then produce outputs based on that learning. And those outputs might be reports, presentations, short films, podcasts, a range of different mediums. So again, there is an analytical side or a kind of story-based understanding side, but then there's a technical skills development within that process as well. And then finally, because as I outlined earlier in the presentation, whilst being a training provider, we have a social change focus. The final part of this cycle is mobilizing stories or responding to what we've learned in them. And this is all about working with groups and communities to help them get the curated outputs, the reports, the films, the insights from the stories, heard by decision makers and people in a position to make change, and then to start to catalyze that change in their community. So there's a bit of social action work that comes on the end of our cycle, where we prepare people in how to work with those findings. So that should hopefully give you an understanding of who we are and what we do in general. And now I want to move on to the main part of this, which is how we adapted for online and back again. It feels like the Hobbit's tale, something where we go there and back again, like the Lord of the Rings or something. But this next part should outline that. So what I've done, I've positioned case studies together to illustrate some of this work, and then I'll summarize some overall learning on different parts, because I thought maybe that was the most useful way of making sense of the last 2 years. So if we first look at the transition to online and the impact of COVID-19, although we've always worked across the UK and Europe, so we've never been focused in one location, it was only basically because of the pandemic, we moved our storytelling training activities online. So pre-April 2020, every training we would deliver was in person. So the pandemic hit, and what that meant was that we then had to think, how does this work when we can't be in the same space as the people we're working with? So during the pandemic, we've developed ways of delivering one-to-one storytelling sessions, group storytelling training, full community reporter training, story curation or sense-making training, and knowledge exchange workshops, all of which we've found formats to deliver these successfully online. And what I would like to share with you is actually, I'm sorry that the titles on the slides have gone a little bit, it's because they've been re-uploaded. On the original version, they'll be fine. What the case study I'd like to first show with you is to show you the impact of transitioning online with a project that we're actually still currently working on called The Value of Co-Production. The reason I've chosen this project is because in the UK now, we're in a position where we could do this work completely offline if we wanted to. We could meet up in person. We could go back to what we were doing pre-pandemic. However, because of the skills development and what we learned of online delivery during the pandemic, actually this project is more suitable for online delivery. So I thought I'd share a bit about that with you. So we're working with Co-Production Collective and Curators of Change to coordinate and deliver a series of activities that use lived experience storytelling as a way of demonstrating the value or the impact of co-production in services, research and policy. So core elements of the program and the training that we're delivering is that we're delivering one-to-one storytelling activities online. We're delivering group sense-making workshops and also knowledge exchange workshops. And as I said at the beginning, although we could have delivered this in person, the reason for online delivery was because, firstly, it's a national program and the team is split across the UK. So there's people taking part from across all aspects, all of the nations in the UK, and online has facilitated that in a much more cost-effective and time-bound way than we ever would have been able to have done in person. There's also a high number of disabled people involved in this project, and sometimes getting to and from venues and travel presents a barrier to their engagement. So therefore, the online has enabled people to take part in their own homes and have PA, personal assistant support, to enable that to happen. It's also given us more flexibility in terms of time. So like the one-to-one sessions have been able to be arranged when people wanted to take part in it, as opposed to when we've booked a room somewhere for someone to come to. And basically, it's allowed us to get a bit more money, value for money. It's cheapened some of our cost on this project. To have done this piece of work where we're working with 100 people in person would have probably doubled or trebled the budget. So therefore, it's got a bit more of an economic value to it. So what we've been doing is we've been using tools such as Zoom and the one-to-one sessions. We find that that tool is the one where people outside of institutions, so the people we're working with, tend to use mostly for informal online communications during the pandemic. So we've gone to where the people were. It also allows us to do things like breakout rooms and screen sharing and recording, all the things that we need in our session. We also use Flinger a lot. Flinger is an online piece of flip chart paper that you can anonymously add post-it notes to. This we use because there's no login and it's one of the more simple tools. Mural and Miro and the others tend to be a bit more complicated for people to use independently, where Flinger is so simple, people pick it up in the first few minutes. And then we've also been using things like Google Forms and Google Documents to collaborate in these sessions so that people can work on them in sessions, but also outside of those sessions if they need extra time to participate. So this is one project. We've also, during the pandemic and during the recovery from COVID, we've gone back to in-person delivery again. And the Not Another co-production project we're running with Ideas Alliance is an example of this. So we've moved back to quite a lot of in-person delivery on this project. And it started in September 2021 when COVID restrictions were starting to reduce in the UK. So the project was almost one of the things we were conscious of in this project is how we make learners and participants comfortable coming back into offline settings after being disconnected for so long. So although what we'd started with was two quite large events for people in terms of there was about 30 or so people at them, and September 2021, that was large numbers because we'd been in like little 3-5 person bubbles for years up until then. But we started with those events in big open areas. And a key part of the startup of those events were allowing people to set their own COVID barriers, because although restrictions had been released, it was about understanding that there was a level of personal comfort that was different than what was legally allowed. So in those initial environments, some people were wearing masks, some people really wanted the hand sanitizer, some people wouldn't share equipment, some people would. And it was kind of putting in place things what would help people navigate that and getting people to be mindful of each other, because you know there were some people who came who just wanted to hug people because it was like the first time they'd seen them for 2 years or so, and they wanted to be in their presence. But then there was other people that were like, no, you need to keep away from me. I'm happy to be here with you, but you're going to have to move away. And it was less about I would say the technical training in those early sessions, and more about supporting people to find a level of comfort that they were happy to mitigate, and that we were kind of reducing those barriers to re-entering into training environments. So we was really mindful of that. Also in these trainings, we realized that sometimes trying to get everyone together all the time in one single space just isn't productive. So despite us running some kickoff events, what were people coming together, what we then did a much more blended program. So some of the activities then were also online. So the regular 1 hour reflective spaces were online, and some of the one-to-one sessions and one-to-one training sessions were online, because that made it easier for us to schedule our trainers' time with the small group or the 2 or 3 people who might have wanted to participate. That allowed us to be much more bespoke. Whereas when you're in the offline world, you can't just deliver 1 hour sessions bespoke for 1 or 2 people, because the cost of getting trainers somewhere, the cost of venue and times would make it really unfundable. So therefore, what we mixed was, we decided that when we bring people together, it would be much slightly larger scale events. The photo there is me and Isaac and Kate on stage at the Science and Industry Museum at the Learning Festival that we held just earlier this month. So we did in-person larger events that brought people together to network and share, but the focused skills development we still kept online, because that gave us the flexibility to run it. So even though we're back in person, we're also noticing the benefits where we keep online. And my final case study, before I quickly summarize some key learnings, is a much more not a blended, but a hybrid approach. So we're doing now, where there's some of us online and some of us in person. So we're working with Camarados as their learning partner to help them work with digital storytelling to inform their organization's activities and to connect their movement. And what we did, this was pretty early on. This was before September 2021. I think it was maybe July or June, as restrictions we were kind of not out of restrictions completely, but we weren't completely locked down either. So what we ran was a hybrid session where some people, a smaller group of people, could be in an in-person space, and a larger number of people could be online. And we did this technically using Zoom again, and tools like Flinger. So when we had a collective Flinger where people online were using that, and then we had the offline version of flip charts and post-it notes in the the offline space as such. And the way we did this was with very basic technology. So we had a kind of setup where we had a projection setup of the people on Zoom, and I used Zoom to do the screen sharing of the PowerPoint, so the people in the room could see it and the people on Zoom could see it. The people on Zoom used the separate Flinger board, which I screen shared back to the people in the room. But how we really integrated the discussion was just basically using a mobile phone, so and an external mic. So we had one external mic in the room because it was a small room, so that the people online could hear, because one of the key problems is audio with hybrid setups. So we had a microphone in the room so people online could hear what the offline people could say. And I went round with another camera connected to the Zoom with the mic muted, basically doing close-ups of, or not so very close-up, but medium shots of people's faces as they were talking, so that people on the Zoom could not just see a whole room of people, but could see individuals who were speaking. And I used this camera to show people online what was on the flip charts in the room as people held them up. So it was almost like a multi-camera setup, what we were doing, but with very basic tech. And the feedback was that it worked, because those kind of things were thought of, and it was that the online persons, they weren't add-ons or observing what was happening. They were a part of what was happening, and that was what was really key. So, quick learnings then. Similarities with online and offline delivery. So the similarities are, you still need to think about safety and well-being of people when you're online. You do that in the offline world, it's just slightly different things. So we still should put them as a focus. You still need to think about access and inclusion. So although I've highlighted that online can open up access for people, there's also digital exclusion barriers, which could be skills or finances based. And, there's always going to be tech issues. So whether you're online or offline, there's tech issues. There's many sessions where you can never get the projector to connect and you just have to go along without it. And I think being confident in just going, okay, well, we'll adapt a little bit, will help you through. The differences with online is that you can't control the environment that people are dialing in from. So, for example, Samari, I can see you. I don't know where you are and I can't control if that's a comfortable environment. I don't know if there's children in the background. There may be, other people you don't want hearing in. You can't control the environment the same you can as an in-person space, and that's difficult. I also can't give hands-on technical support. So if Samari turned around and said, oh, I can't hear you, I'd be like, I can't come round to your computer and change the settings for you. I can only try and talk you through it. And finally, it's not as easy to change plan, because if you need to have a flinger board or a mirror or a mural set up, they take a bit of time to do. It's not the same as whipping off a piece of flip chart paper from a pad and putting it on a table. Learning from hybrid and blended. So in terms of online and remote, I think the pros are you can reduce some environmental impact and costs. So things like travel and printed resources. However, you should be mindful that, when you record these things, the server space that things like that take now across the world is actually an environmental issue. So you can reduce costs on travel and room hire. And I guess in some ways, COVID has asked us to innovate our practice. So it's evolved what we do for the better. It's given us more tools. The cons are group dynamics. Like, it's really hard to read the room online. The atmosphere that you gather and you feel, it's really hard to pick up on that as in the same way as you would do in a room. There's digital exclusion. People don't have the right equipment or the cost of internet access, the cost of equipment. We find informal chat is reduced online. So normally, like when you were just having your tea break before this webinar started, there's informal chitter chatter and conversations. Online tends to start and end at the time. And that informality is harder to create. And also people will have distractions online. So they'll probably be answering emails at the same time, and that can be quite difficult to navigate. So finally, I think this is my final bit where I just want to wrap up on some tips I would suggest, is if you're doing hybrid or blended, design your sessions for them. Don't just simply replicate offline or in-person activities or online activities. Think about the needs of that workshop environment. So don't just go, oh, this works in the offline world, or this works purely online, so it will definitely work. It's thinking about how you get the best of that hybrid or blended delivery model for your training. Always keep it simple with technology. That doesn't mean like not using new innovative tools and testing them out, but just because something exists doesn't mean you have to use it. Sometimes the simpler the better. And that works for the learners as well, because we try to keep, we try to just use either Zoom and one tool like Flinger or something like that in a session, rather than multiple tools, because the more tools you have, the more that you have a chance of alienating people. Secondly, make sure it's interactive. So don't just have the online people watching an activity. That's really horrendous, especially if the audio is horrible. People online still want to participate. They don't want to be like a fly on the wall most of the time. They want to engage. So think of ways you can do that, and then provide space for people to contribute. And don't worry about that silence. Give people sometimes a space to fill it. What I mean by that is when you're listening online, or it might feel like a TV show, and the silence for 2-3 seconds feels like it goes on forever. don't just jump in and fill it. Just keep that silence. And I'm telling you, a participant will come into that silence and fill it. And also different ways of interacting. It could be verbally, it could be in chat boxes, it could be on online boards. There's a range of ways that people can interact as well. And that's it, I think. So I think we can probably go to your questions. Sorry if I've gone over a little bit. Hopefully some of that was useful for you. And I'll be quiet. I'll bring Martin back in to chair maybe.
Thank you, Hayley. Yes, we will open now up the floor for questions. Okay, now I made a small break for the editing. So guys, I just want to explain you how the question would work. Those who are online, please just switch on your microphone and your camera. And for the others here in the room, we have a microphone, but I followed Hayley's ideas. So I have a camera as well on here, which we will share in a minute, so on a mobile phone. So you can see CRN2, so you can see actually now the room. So we are doing it on the mobile phone, and I will give you the mobile phone to you, so you can ask your question and use the microphone in the room for this. So the microphone here will be, the mobile phone will be switched off at that moment. Okay, so let's go back to the recording in 1 or 2 seconds. Yeah, please share your question with us. Who wants to be the first to ask? Maybe raise as well your hand if you're online. Or here in the room, you also can raise your hand if you have a question.
I don't have a question, but I want to say...
Wait one moment. Yeah. Now we will bring the camera
to
you.
Just for a couple of questions, we were talking with Andrea, the problem of making attractive the training. I saw the answer in one of your slides. That was good. That's all. I mean, I just saw that. So some of questions we had about needs. I saw about quite a bit good answer. That's it.
The question of storytelling about she talks a lot about storytelling when we talk about the way to make more attractive, and for sure it's good techniques. I know a bit the work of Hayley, so I know how much they are good in this. So it was really interesting because it's really connected to the need of the people in some way. The people need to talk about themselves because they feel for a long time they feel isolated and alone. So the idea to involve them with the possibility to talk about their life, it's really interesting. So it was a good starting point.
Here in the room, Shemek has the next question.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Hayley, for this presentation. It was very comprehensive, and it's difficult to find a proper question because you answered of all of our questions. But I would like to ask about you have indicated pro and cons, and we have the same challenge that when we have an online question, we don't have the informal cooperation between people. How do you get on in storytelling to fulfill this gap when you use online educative storytelling? Because for us, from my point of view, it's very important to get a cooperation with people in formal education, but also in the period of informal people, where people can exchange and share knowledge between breaks and something between.
Yeah, so we've tried to do that in a few different ways. So at the start of sessions, we tend to have, if it's online, we'll have music playing. So people come in and we have got different music playing, and it's all a bit more informal. And we tend to start having chatter with people, with the music in the background going, oh, how's your day been? And we try and cultivate it there at the start. There's also been things that we've tried during the breaks, like going, oh, everyone go and get a cup of tea and we'll come back and keep, rather than come back in 15 minutes, we say come back in 5 minutes and we'll have a 15-minute sit here in a chat. So we actively put them in. And other things we've tried is we've like got people's addresses beforehand, and we've sent out like chocolate biscuits for the breaks to people. So that kind of encouraged people to have those more informal conversations. And on Zoom, finally, we've used like breakout rooms for that. So we've set just some up and people wander into them on their own, because they can choose, you know, on Zoom, you can select an option where people can choose to move into breakout rooms. So we kind of labeled them, you know, like general chit chat, networking, quiet space, you know, so people can move around to where they want to go in the breaks. So we've tried a few of those. I would say that the sending out of food or vouchers for lunch or something like that in advance is the far most successful way of getting people to feel a bit more social. So like the team at PVM, we all got little hampers at Christmas and did a Christmas party online. So I think food does help those environments, but if you can, like simple things like playing music at the start of the session and having some music in the breaks and things helps cultivate a little bit of that. But it's really hard. It's not the same as walking past someone on the way to the toilet and having an ad hoc conversation. It has to be more structured and thought of than that. So it's a bit harder.
Thank you. Now that's a really nice idea with the food. I also thought about it, to send Uber codes to everybody, Uber Eats or something like this, and then having a common lunch conversation. Are there any other questions, maybe from our participants who are online? Don't let me hanging there. George, I think you want to ask a question. Maybe you have to unmute yourself. You're muted. Or at least I saw your mouth.
No, I didn't want to ask any questions.
Sorry. I misread the room. I can see that we have another question from Przemek. He's really eager to ask a question.
Okay, another question. Thank you for answering the last question. But as you know, each trainer has to have the most challengeable for the trainer is to keep focus the group on the training. And as you know, it is quite more difficult to keep focus people on the online. Do you have another tool what you develop how to make stay focused of the people who are online? Because sometimes there's the problem that people online shut down the camera and do something bigger, do something more, not only focusing on the training. Do you have some ideas how we can get on with this? Thank you.
Yep. I just let Martin mute the room because I can hear myself a bit. Perfect. Yes, so that's a big issue for us, because when you're doing storytelling, you don't want to feel like you're sharing your story to people who either aren't listening or you don't know, who they are because they've turned the camera off or they've not shared with you who they are. So there's a few things that I would say that we learned during the pandemic to do to help with that issue. So the first thing is is in how you promote the session, is that you promote it as interactive, participatory. You will be involved in these activities, because there's a lot of people who think that online is like, more like a webinar, where just like I did, where it's a presentation and you can sit and listen. So if it is a workshop, you need to clearly make sure that you communicate that beforehand. I then always communicate that at the start of the session to people, so that people who don't want to participate can log off, basically, and they can go, oh, this isn't for me. I thought I could just have it on in the background. So making that clear. Secondly, because people get distracted when they're not in a space and they're online, I think you have to minimize the presentation or the speaking at people that you do. You have to keep it very short, and you have to move into activity very quickly. And those activities need to be short and time bound. So whereas you might be able to do a 20-minute, half an hour presentation in person and then get people doing an activity because you've got them in a room, I think that that's probably too long for most people online, and they start to, you know, answer emails or look at social media or read the news online. So I would tend to keep presentation really bite-sized and move into a moment of interactivity or participation, and then go back to a bit more of a presentation and do it like that, you know, to really break it down in a very structured way. And finally, the camera thing is difficult because some people don't want to show their background if it's like their home or there's other people there, or they don't want, you know, like their face to be seen for maybe religious or cultural reasons because of the sex of the people who are in the room. All of these problems came up when we was delivering online. So how I start sessions when we're delivering storytelling is that I invite people to turn their cameras on, and I explain, if you can and you feel comfortable, I would really appreciate it, because it's really hard online to see just blank screens. It's like delivering a lecture and everyone turning their back on you and you can't see people's faces. So I actively invite people to turn their cameras on. But I also acknowledge that it's okay if you are uncomfortable, you can leave your camera off. And I outline why people might feel uncomfortable, as long as you either open up your mic and speak, or put things in the chat so that we know that you're with us and you're contributing. And then I always start with an icebreaker where everyone has a moment to share something either on camera, on audio, or in the chat, so that everyone in that space knows everyone's a real person who's there, and that they're not just someone, either a bot that's hacked it or someone who is not participating. So those are the things that we try to do to minimize those issues. And also, I think you have to keep online shorter or bite-sized. So if you're delivering a day-long session online, I would deliver it as 1 hour sessions with 1 hour between them, you know, so that there's little chunks of learning throughout the day, with maybe some offline independent tasks to be doing as well, because I don't think you can do the same amount of time in one chunk online as what you can do offline.
Thank you. There is one more question from Paulina. One moment.
Yes, hello, Hayley. Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. And I had this question about what are you doing now after COVID? Did you come back to the face-to-face meetings, or will you continue it in a hybrid or online way?
Both. So some projects, like the Value of CoPro project, what we're doing now is completely online, even though it doesn't need to be. There's some programs what are completely offline, in person, and there's some what we're doing hybrid or blended, where hybrid for us is where you have sessions that are simultaneously online and offline, you know, so you have like today. Or blended is what we would say is where you might have some in-person activity in the wider program and some online activity. So we're never going to fully go back to purely in-person delivery, because for us, online or hybrid or blended has opened up other opportunities. So now what we're doing is navigating how we get the best of both arenas, and we make those decisions based on the training program and the people who are participating. So some programs will always be better in person, and some programs are made for online, and some programs offer a bit of both. And we make those decisions individually on each project that we work on. So we don't have a pre-described format. We think how it would work best in the environment, and that's about the needs of the participants. It's about the scope of the project. It's about budget. There's all of these different factors that we take into consideration, but we will never purely be back totally in person, because there are benefits to the negativity that the pandemic has caused in terms of how it has pushed us to innovate how we deliver training.
Okay, thank you, Hayley. This was a really interesting and valuable insight. So I assume that even all the questions we wanted to ask and the topics we wanted to get are really answered. I think we took a few really interesting key learnings from you, and there are some tools to be discovered, like Flinger. I mean, I know it already, but maybe for some of you, we will put the link to Flinger, of course, in the final version of the webcast, so you want to find it as well in the comments. And I think the other take is really sometimes simplicity is winning. So even now we adapted really quick with just putting another mobile camera into the conversation, so you could actually see the room, and I will put it up in a second again so that the room can say as well goodbye to you guys. But I also like really much the simplicity with just sending out food or playing common music and noticing that you're there, because I think what we also will see in the following webinars is that being hybrid has a lot of challenges, and I think your smart solutions and easy solutions are really quick implementable, and let's see if even in our work it will really change something in the upcoming months. So I want to say thank you to Hayley again. So you will have a close-up of all the room. I also want to thank everyone who's online for joining us. And we will keep you informed about the next webcast, which we're going to have really soon. And now the webcast will be officially over. However, I would like to keep everyone for a minute maybe here, because we still have like 10 minutes left, and the chance to actually talk with Hayley how it was and how you felt about this seminar and what maybe we can change in the future. Especially the people who are online. Do you want to share shortly how did you felt during this webinar?
Yes, if I can. I mean, Hayley, probably because she was perfectly aware of the project content, had a very comprehensive and very how can I say? She touched each topic that we wanted already to discuss with her. So there was not so much space for other questions, because she answered already to all the questions we discussed in the session before this webinar. Probably if with other participants, we won't have the same result. So do you think that we should already give the speaker detailed questions, or tell them more generically our expectations from the webinar?
I mean, how was it for you, Hayley? Because you delivered this presentation. Did you have sufficient information, or would you have wanted more questions? Because if I remember right, I just told you 3-4 sentences. I didn't actually went into the questions, right? To the preparation.
Yeah, I think possibly because I, obviously remember the initial bit. Maybe there was something in the back of my mind where I might know more than your other people. But no, I think you just said your message. I was just having a look at it. I think was, can you do the webinar? And I said, oh, what? Remind me again what it's on, because obviously I've not read the big prep. And I think you said something along the lines of how you went from online and back again during COVID with your training, adult education, and that was it. So so I think I think it's by fluke, Francesca, that I've actually answered the questions as opposed to being prepared to do it. I think it's a coincidence. So I don't know. It might be if you think that that's useful to give the speakers beforehand, you know, what you're expecting them, a bullet point list of things, and it might be helpful. But it wasn't because Martin had given me that breakdown. As such, it was quite open. And it could be either because I've got some distant memory of the bid, or because I tend to work or present in a very structured way anyway, that the questions are answered. I think it might be, what would probably be useful just from a tech angle is to determine if people are going to use a presentation before, and maybe send it to you, Martin, the day before and have it preloaded. And, you know, would be my input onto that. Is the only thing I would think. I think for me, once, you know, the audio was connected, like we could hear you quite well with that microphone, you know, and normally online, that's the biggest problem, but we could hear okay today. And yeah, I would just say maybe the day before the webinar, have the slides or the visual materials. And I think it's worked well, you uploading them and me being able to click through them at my own pace. That works better than next slide, please, you know. So I think that part of the platform works well.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, the platform actually, it surprised me positively, because also now we have the recording, and the recording will be accessible in two ways. We can download it, but we also can play it directly in a player which is integrated in the platform. So I can send actually just a link. I don't even have to download the video, and people just can revisit this conversation. So if some of you would love to use as well Big Blue Button, but you don't have the license, or you don't want to buy the license, give me an information, and we also can provide you for your webcast this platform as well. However, then we might have to do a short training maybe, or we have to do a tutorial that, you know, what are the most important functions. I think the other thing what I have to share with everyone is that, yeah, of course, we should test the installation and don't move the camera, because if you move something, it totally went black out. Everything went smooth the whole morning. But what is important is that we have to keep in mind that this is a webcast. So literally it is a media production. It is not a live stream. So I think what Hayley did, but also what I try to do, is that at certain moments you have to add a short minute of silence. Then you can make an announcement, like the technical announcements. Then you make another moment of silence. And then you start talking again, because the silence can be indicators later on to cut the videos. So like Hayley said, there will be an animation. So of course we will get the animation, and we will add the animation at the right moment. So don't forget that the webcasts are media production. They are not live stories or something like this. So we can even work around. And I mean, Hayley is a really fluent speaker, so she didn't have to restart or anything.
A very good English.
She had a really good English. We don't know why. How?
It's like native.
Almost native, yeah. It just had a really weird Wigan accent. However, this is, of course, to remind you that we have also a post-production on this. So we can add things, and also if a speaker is like struggling, you can tell them, okay, if you start a sentence wrong, just say, give us a keyword, then count to yourself 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, not loud, but in your mind, and then start the sentence again. So, because this is what we can do here, as it is a media production. I think this is also really important for all of you to keep in mind, that it doesn't have to be perfect on the first take. And also the questions. I mean, as I said, we had the Miro board in front of you, so we had all the questions, but you answered most of them, Hayley. So it was a little bit complicated, but it would be also a good idea to instruct people to ask questions, and to have maybe the questions then as well distributed to the audience, at least if you know some of the people in the audience. This is maybe also a good production tip I just learned, and I love the idea of Hayley with a second camera, so you can just put a mobile phone connected to this, and then you can make the live shots. I mean, now I'm doing it in a more professional setup. Next time I would take another person who would do it so that I can communicate. But it was a spontaneous thing, and I just thought to myself, yeah, let's do that, because Heidi's right. This is actually really easy. Great. But are there any other reflections or ideas, both from the online and the offline world? Maybe for me, it would be interesting to get an idea from the online people who joined online. How do you felt during the presentation? Was the room disturbing, or was it okay? Or yeah, how was your feeling? Because, you know, I saw the faces here, but I haven't seen all of you.
I think it was good to have that second camera. Definitely made us feel like we were there and we weren't so outside of everything. I do have a question though, because we have one participant who I think is a bit concerned about not being a natural presenter. So I don't know if Hayley has any ideas or tips on how to kind of make them feel a bit more comfortable with that idea.
Yeah, I think it would be like making sure that they've got like I use the reason I use slides is because that helps me remember what I'm going to be saying. It gives me a little bit of focus. So I think some kind of visual aid or something to talk through, or just the key points, whether that's written down as bullet points or as a visual aid, helps people. It also could be like starting small. So some of the things we do at our events is like soapbox talks, where people just talk for 3 minutes, but there's different people doing just 3 minutes of what they want to talk about, and it's the next person. So there's kind of like lightning TEDx style talks, help people rather than kind of like a longer form speaking part. And I don't know, I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I do this day in, day out. So to me, turning up to an online room where, I couldn't see everyone at the start and I couldn't see everyone in person, fine. It's generally some folk I know and some people I don't, and I'm just going to do a presentation, where I think maybe if someone's not used to speaking in front of people, that can be quite daunting. So it might be about get people knowing who's there and some introductions beforehand, and a bit of meet and greet, which adds time to things. But I'm probably not the right person to ask about how to support people to do a kind of presentation or webinar, because to me it's a bit second nature, and we don't necessarily train people in how to do that. We do storytelling, what's one-to-one and very different. So I'm probably definitely the wrong person to ask about confidence in public speaking. But my trick is that I use slides or visual aids as prompters, as a way of keeping, because generally my brain goes off in lots of different directions and I can be really unstructured if I don't have some kind of scaffolding or loose structure to stick to. And for me, presentation slides work.
Thank you so much.
I might add, there is, of course, the situation that now we have an online presentation, so we have an online presenter, but maybe already the next webcast will be that I will sit with somebody next to me. And so in this moment, we would maybe have more a conversational moment. So it doesn't have to be a presentation, and it doesn't have to be one person alone. So you could invite this person maybe over. You both sit in comfortable chairs, have a table in between of you where there's a microphone. You put the camera maybe on a tripod, and then you have a coffee and you just talk with them. So maybe this is also lowering their agency, because it feels then more like a conversation, and that would mean, of course, that the moderator will have more guidance and more work to do. However, this is, of course, as well an option how we can do it. And I think within Beyond Zoom, I have a short look to our Polish partners. It is not so much important how the conversation or the information is gathered. It is rather that we gather it. And so, for example, Amy, you could think to maybe go to their office if they feel more comfortable there, or let them choose as well a location they like. and then start the event there. So this is also, of course, always a possibility, and it helps people who are not so keen on presenting to start a conversation, because it's usually easier for them to talk to somebody than to talk to, like a void. Because Hayley, of course, she was talking to us, but it was not a conversation, it was a presentation. But conversations usually are easier for those people to work with.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Good. Otherwise, I would say we have already reached 1 hour. Of course, the webcast will not be 1 hour. I wanted to take the chance to have a feedback from Hayley, how it went for her, and I wanted to have a feeling as well from you guys, how it went for you. I think this is it at the moment. So I want to thank Hayley officially for sacrificing 1 hour for us. And I also want to say thank you to everybody who's online, because we also will close the kickoff now with the lunch break, with the lunch here in Berlin, but also you should have your lunch. And I hope that everyone still remembers the actions you have to do. Otherwise, we also will provide you, of course, with a summary of the action points we had. And yeah, thank you, Hayley. And thank you, everyone else. And for those in the room, have a good flight back home. And for those online, I mean, I will put the camera up again, although I look stupid. We can wave everybody. And thanks a lot, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
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 Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.